Hi, I'm Bill Holcomb, and today I will be showing you some essential watercolor tips to help improve your painting skills. You can download my free sketch in the description and also find a list of the materials used in this video. I'll be giving some tips along the way as we go through this tutorial. I start at the very top of the paper with a nice light wash of Winsor Yellow. It is so light because we'll be laying over some blue and we don't want that to be too strong, because once we lay the blue over we don't want to create green clouds. But it's very light and it will be overpowered by the Winsor Blue wash. So here we go with the Winsor Blue coming in at the top again, still using my number 12 brush, round brush. And as I lay down those washes, I'm leaving some gaps to create the effect of clouds, lighter here and there. And those edges that we see of pigment and water on the sides will be mopped up with some tissue or a very dry brush. I certainly advise doing that before you resort to drying off the wash, perhaps with a hairdryer, so you don't get creep back. So come down to the horizon, and then once we've done that, we're going to use a flat brush to lay down some cloud formations as we're doing now. And that's my next tip, to use a flat brush to create your cloud formations. You retain much more control of doing the clouds when you have a flat brush compared to a round brush. That cloud mixture is the Winsor Blue with some light red. And make sure that as you get further down towards the horizon, that the clouds are thinner. This is still wet and wet. As you can see, they are thinner and much more control with that flat brush. You can see that we've got a nice contrast of light areas, dark areas, the very blue areas, and then the very dark cloud areas. And then that's been dried off with a hairdryer. We've turned to a number 2 brush for the distant sailing boats. So that number 2 brush got a very small number of hairs on it that enables us to retain control and accuracy. When you've got distant sailing boats and things like that, it's always good to just add a couple in there. Once you get to 3 or more, it gets a little bit too much, a little bit too crowded. But a couple of them will do the trick. Another tip I would give you is, and we'll certainly be doing this more later, is to use a tissue to take off excess water or pigment on the brush. One of the big problems that occur in transparent watercolor painting is either too much water or too much pigment on the brush. If that is the case, then you lose your control. By taking off some of the excess, you're much more likely to retain control. So I think that's a very important point, and it is something that a lot of people don't realize when they're doing watercolor, and then they find it frustrating because they find it very hard to control the whole thing, and the painting runs away with them, and the water starts going and pigment in various directions because it's so excessive, and they find it hard to control it. And of course, it's important, as I've mentioned in previous tutorials, but I'll say again, to have your paper at an angle. So I've got it on a board, but at the very top of the board, I've got a block of wood, which is therefore creating a slope. It's a very fine slope. It can be 15, 20, 25 degrees. something like that, so that when you lay your washes down, the pigment slowly creeps down the paper towards the horizon level. That is important because if you don't do that, then you're much likely to get pooling of the pigment and creep back, various lines occurring where you don't want them, and you can find that you have less control, etc. So always set up your paper in that fashion. When I'm painting the main boat here, I'm starting with a darker wash towards the stern, and then I come so far through, and because I want the bow area to be light, I come so far through, and then I'll take off pigment off the brush, as you can see now, and I'll add water and just fuse those together so that I get a lighter area at the bow of the boat. So that's another tip that I can give you to achieve that variation where you're going from dark to light and vice versa. And I can strengthen that stern up even more now that I've done that. Still using a very small brush, something like a number 2. Then another tip I can give you is use of the flat brush again to do some lifting. I've got some clear water on the brush, and that's going along the horizon level, and I'm just using some tissue then to lift that area so it's nice and faint in that distance rather than a hard line. Then my next tip is using your mop brush, lay water all across the ocean level. If you do that first, then when you come in with your flat brush, you can get a nice foamy type sea with lots of light areas in between the waves. This is one way of achieving the effect on water, oceans or lakes and rivers and so forth, without it being too harsh. Of course, if you wanted a more dramatic water situation, then you would approach it a different way. And instead of doing wet in wet, you're more likely to do the dry washes. Then using the flat brush again, I've dried it off first of all, of course, with the hairdryer, and then using the flat brush for control to show reflections in the water. And in the distance there, the little sailing boats are very faint and very thin reflections. Then once we've dried that off, we're using the flat brush again to show ripples in the water. Once again, retaining control. And you saw me there quickly using the tissue again, taking off some of the excess. Make sure it wasn't too much pigment or too strong. And remember that as we get into the distance, those lines will be thinner, and the flat brush enables you to achieve this. We're getting very much towards the end of this tutorial, so I hope you've found this very useful. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.